Joined this morning by 8-year NFL head coaching veteran, former cornerback in the league as well, and current ESPN analyst. Today we go outside the box with Herm Edwards. Herm, good morning.
Good morning.
I saw that if football didn't pan out for you, potentially, you had a degree in criminal justice from San Diego State University. Was that going to be Plan B?
Correct. I wanted to be an FBI agent, believe it or not.
That's cool.
Yeah, growing up, I used to watch those Secret Service men that were, walking with the president, and I said, I might want to be one of those guys or an FBI guy. So
that would have been an all right.
Yeah,
you did all right, but that would have been a good Plan B.
I was good. My father was in the military, so I was used to structure, and all that type of stuff. So it was kind of interesting, but I'm glad football worked out.
I want to touch on your dad and the military background a little bit later and all the lives you've touched of players and those that you've come across in the football world. And not here to talk current NFL, but I'm a Chicago guy, Herm, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about our 2023 Bears real quick. A lot of expectation for Justin Fields here from Bears fans in Chicago. What's one word, Justin Fields, that comes to mind when you think of the quarterback of the Chicago Bears?
Dynamic. He's a dynamic athlete. And now he just has to progress on playing the position of quarterback, right? And I think if he can take the steps that Jalen Hurts has taken, you got yourself a really good quarterback. And I do believe this team is going to be much improved. I don't know if they win the division, but they'll be very competitive in this division. I can see them winning at least 8-9 games for sure.
Herm, you and I have never met, but I got to be honest, I'm such a huge fan of yours over the years. I'm always enamored by your intensity and the inspirational approach that you have. It seems like for life in general, but to the game of football. And you talked about your dad a little bit earlier on, that he was a decorated military veteran. How much of this approach and your lifestyle mindset comes from your dad?
A lot from my father and my mom. My mom was a German war bride, and neither one of them finished high school. My father joined the Army at a very young age. My mom worked in the factories in Germany. Mm-hmm. So, these were two people that work ethic was the top-notch thing you have to do. They always say autograph your performance with your work. And when you sign on to do something, you finish the job, regardless of if you like it or not. There's no tapping out, he used to call it. You can't tap out. You finish the job, right?
Yeah.
And so, and when you make a mistake, you stand up, say, I made a mistake, and you move on, and you don't, and he said, you're going to make mistakes in life. And that's what life's about. You make mistakes, but long as the intention was good, sometimes you make mistakes and the intentions are good, but it's a mistake and you got to live with that. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, it was about, just doing things right and always trying to do things right and helping others along, always giving a hand out, not a hand, a hand up, not a handout per se. Help people along. That's your calling. Help others. And I've always felt that way. When you get in a position where you can help other people, especially in your community, that was important to me. And that's kind of how I try to live my life that way.
I heard a great story that you told, and I hope it's true, and maybe you can elaborate on it, about a broom and the broom your dad gave you and what that meant to you moving forward. Just such a simple but beautiful story. Go ahead.
Yeah, my father, one day I wanted to earn some money, so he said, okay, I'm going to let you earn an allowance. He said, but you got to sweep the backyard. And back in those days when I grew up, and even today, they still have brooms, but a lot of people use these blowers. Well, there was no blower in my era growing up. There was a broom. And I swept the backyard. It took about 10 minutes, and I come back in and said, Dad, I did my work. I swept the backyard. So, he's a master sergeant. He's going to check your work. So he comes out, and the first thing he starts doing, he's walking to the corners of the backyard. And he goes, after about the second corner, I didn't do that real good. I kind of see that, right? And so he comes back, he says, son, you didn't do the corners. And I said, well, Dad, I said, hey, no one knows. And he looks at me, he says, son, you know. He said, life is about doing the corners. You got to do the little things. And it dawned upon me, I went, wow, the corners, huh? And I'm going to turn 70 in April. I can't tell you in my yard how many brooms I've worn out. I don't have a blower. I'm a broom guy, and I still sweep. And every time I sweep, I think of my father. And I do it on purpose. I think of my dad. He's gone now. But when I put that broom in my hand and I'm sweeping, I always think about my dad.
I love that. I think that's so cool. That mindset that you talk about, that you learned from watching your dad and what he taught you, obviously played a part in your career path for sure, during your playing days as well as when you patrolled the sideline, I assume. But many probably don't realize, as a player, you were undrafted coming out of college, but this was not a deterrence to you.
No, and it really fueled me even more. And it was interesting. I came out of high school and went to Cal Berkeley. I played up there as a freshman. And then going into my sophomore year, I got into a little bit of a dispute with one of my coaches. And this is what drove me to coaching, be quite honest. I asked him a question. It was why we were doing a drill, right? And back in my era, when you grew up, you didn't ask the coach why. That was not part of the deal. You jumped and you rolled over and you did whatever the coach did. You never asked the coach why. That you couldn't even ask it. They told you what to do, told you how to do it. And if they told you why, that was fine. But that was the last thing. Well, in today's world, you better tell people why before you even start. You better tell the athlete why before you start. He's going to question. So we get in this dispute and I end up leaving. And I go to a JC, my local JC here, and I play. And I would have to get an AA to go somewhere else. And so they convinced me to come back. So I go back my junior year, and they moved the position coach. He coached another position. I played my junior year. I'm all Pac 8. It was a Pac 8 then. And I get into my senior year, and I go to spring ball. And the coach that was coaching me leaves, and he goes to San Francisco, a secondary coach. And they bring this coach back. By the second practice of spring, I leave again. And I ended up at San Diego State. I have to sit out a year. So I go down there in the spring, and they don't have any scholarships. So I work in the shipyard at night, and I go to school during the day, and I got to sit out a whole season. This is when you got to sit out. I wish the porter was involved in those days, but it's not. And I end up playing at San Diego State my senior year. 12 rounds in the draft. I'm projected to get drafted maybe in the second round. After about the fourth round, I called the operator and said, will you call this number? Because I was making sure my phone worked. And she called it and it rang. I said, oh, this is not good. And so I didn't get drafted. And the sum of it was this. I basically got blackballed. Because I think I was labeled as a guy that was questioning authority. And I wasn't questioning authority so much as I was trying to gain knowledge. Because that's what my father always said. You always got to ask why. Because why is knowledge. Until you know why, you really have no knowledge. People can tell you what to do and how to do it, but why are you doing it, right? And you need to know that, son. You need to, and my father taught me that. You see, you can ask why. It's okay. Well, in sports, you couldn't ask why. In the era I grew up, in the early 70s, that was not, you can't ask why. And so that was a thought in my brain. And so Dick Vermeil recruited me out of high school to go to UCLA. And I ended up going to Cal. So I go to Miami for a free agent tryout. Bobby Beathard was the scouting coordinator. I knew him very well. And I go there and I work out for 2 days, and Coach Schuler brings me in the office. He says, you haven't signed a contract yet. I said, Coach, I promised the Eagles I'd go see them too. And so he said, the Eagles? He said, and he had a winning organization down in Miami. He said, look, you can come here. We'll give you an opportunity to play. And I said, nah, Coach, I promised Coach that I would visit them as well. So I leave without a contract. I go to Philadelphia. I work out for 2 days, and Coach Vermeil brings me in. He said, look, I'm going to give you an opportunity to make this team. And I looked at Coach. I said, Coach, I don't want to make the team. I'll come here to start. I said, you got to give me an opportunity to start. And he looked at me. He goes, okay, I promise you that. So I go there as an undrafted free agent, and there's 22 defensive backs. At the end, training camp was 2 months long. There were 6 preseason games.
Wow.
There were only 14 regular season games in 1977. People don't realize that. And guess what? In the preseason, everybody played. Everybody played. Starters, everybody played. It wasn't you wear your baseball hat in today's game. Everybody played. And so I get in camp, and there was a guy by the name of John Outlaw, a veteran corner. And I can remember visiting with him about the first week. And I said, John, I said, how many DBs make it? He said, 8 of them. And I looked at him, and I said, who's the other 7? And he said, me. And he said, what you say, Rook? I said, who's the other 7? I said, because I ain't going home, man. I said, I can't go home. And lo and behold, things worked out, and I ended up being a starter. And I always tell people my claim to fame in football and in sports in general, from high school to college to professional football, I never missed a practice. I never missed a start.
That's awesome. And what sticks out to me most there, obviously the rest is history. You made the right choice and you did what you had to do, but you walked away from Don Shula. Did he ever come up to you afterwards?
Oh, yeah. He came up to me.
What the hell were you
first game was in the Hall of Fame game. Right? And so we're playing the Miami Dolphins, and Nat Moore is sitting out there, and I'm kind of covering Nat Moore, and he runs this out, up, and then back out. And I've never seen that before. And so he runs an out and up, and I'm ready for that. So I take off, and I'm running to go, and all of a sudden, 20 yards on the field, he stops, and he runs back out. And the quarterback then was, it was the Suns on television, does some commentating now. Greasy.
Greasy. Okay.
So Greasy throws Nat Moore this ball, and he catches on the sideline of the Miami Dolphins in the preseason Hall of Fame game, and I kind of tackle him out of bounds, and Coach Shula looks at me, and I smile. I said, "You put that in for me?" He was a great man. He really was. And he says, boy, you could have been a Dolphin. And, from there, we would laugh every time we played Miami, And he said, you're the only guy that ever got away from me in a conversation that I had, and it was funny, but ended up working out okay.
We're outside the box with Herm Edwards. Today, Herm's one of only 4 NFL coaches to lead 2 different teams to the playoffs in his first season as head coach with that team. He had some great seasons, Herm, with the Jets in New York, which is historically a tough market to operate in, I would assume. Your time there coincided with Joe Torre's legendary run with the Yankees. What did you learn from Joe? Did you guys ever sit down and talk shop?
We used to talk to each other. We were very, he was funny because he used to watch my press conferences. He used to get a laugh out of my press conferences because we had some lively ones at times, and I just think his mannerism, being in New York, I was able to go to a Yankee game. Reggie Jackson was a good friend of mine. I knew about the Yankees, just, knew the history of the Yankees. And to coach that team the way he coached it, it was unbelievable with all those stars, and in the bright lights of New York. And I think my time in Philadelphia really helped me, because if you can play in Philadelphia, I mean, they got a media there too, right? You kind of learn from that. Coach Parcells gave me some good advice when I took the job as well. He said, just be you, be authentic, and just you set the tone when you go into the press conference. Don't let them set the tone. You need to set the tone. And I said, okay. And I remembered that, and I was always honest, try to give them enough information so they could do their stories. But was guarded as well, try to guard the players as much as I could, and information that I didn't want out, guarded that. And there's sometimes you use the media to get information out. That's part of the deal. You understand that.
Did you see yourself as a coach before you were officially a coach? Does that make sense?
I wanted to give back. And, I had no aspirations of being a head coach.
Really?
No. I wanted to be a position coach, and I was fine with that. And with Tony, Tony Dungy is a really good friend of mine. We came out of college at the same time together, and we played in some all-star games. And then we were on the staff. When I got out of pro football, I went to San Jose State and coached there for 3 years. And I did an internship in Kansas City with Marty. Carl Peterson was there, and he was the former GM of the Philadelphia Eagles when I was there. So I knew him, Carl, and he was with Dick at UCLA. So I go there in the summer and did an internship. Tony was on that staff, Bill Cowher, Bruce Arians, bunch of
Wow.
great coaches. Marty was the head coach. And so I do an internship there for the summer and go back to San Jose State, coach. And then the next year, Lamar Hunt, God bless him, one of the greatest owners ever around. His son is doing a marvelous job as well. But Lamar was a true gentleman. His family, everything Lamar stood for. They created a job for me, being a part-time scout and being a part-time coach. So I worked under Tony because I think their thinking was Bill Cowher's going to be a head coach one day. Tony Dungy's going to be a head coach one day. We got to get somebody else in the mix that when they leave, they'll be ready. So I worked with Tony in the secondary. Tony taught me how to coach at that level. And then Bill ended up leaving and going to Pittsburgh to become the head coach. Tony ended up leaving and becoming a coordinator in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. He hired Dave Adolph. Marty did, a guy that he had coached with before in Cleveland, became the coordinator. I became the secondary coach. And then when Tony took over in Tampa, we used to talk about it all the time when we were together, that I was going with him. And lo and behold, I go with Tony to Tampa. He makes me the assistant head coach, and I'm the secondary coach. And he taught me, how to basically be a head coach. So I stood under him for about 5 years before I became the Jets head coach. And I was fine. I was like, I don't need to go anywhere. And he looks at me and says, you got to go, man. You got to go do this. And so I leave. He hired Mike Tomlin from there. Mike Tomlin took my spot. Lovey was on that staff. Rod Marinelli was on that staff as well. Wow. They all became head coaches. So Tony had a lot of success with coaches under his watch getting the opportunity to be head coaches.
He knew that you had what it took.
Well, I think, and the fact that we had been together for so long, we knew each other coming out of college from those all-star games, and he was grooming me to be a head coach. And a credit to Paul Tagliabue, he invited me to some owners' meetings when I was the assistant head coach and had me speak on a couple of panels in front of the owners, and that always helped. And then, the decision was made, hey, you're going to have an opportunity. I go to the Jets. That was my first interview. And then I go back to the Senior Bowl, and I got 4 more interviews, and they ended up calling me back and saying, hey, we want you to hire you, And Terry Bradway, who worked in Kansas City, was the GM there along with Mike Tannenbaum, who's assistant GM. They called me back and say, look, we want you to take this job. And so I said, but he said, don't worry about it. And so I said, when? He said, we want to introduce you tomorrow. And I said, how am I going to do that? My wife says, oh, no, we'll get your wife up here. So I leave from there. She has my suits and everything else. I meet her in the airport at 12 o'clock at night. And the next day, I'm standing in this auditorium. I'm sitting in the auditorium, right? And you don't realize the media in New York, right? I've seen some media in Kansas City, whatever. And I'm like, okay, in Philadelphia. But I walk in this room, and the night before, my wife said, did you write something down, a speech or something? I said, I'll be okay. I didn't think it was going to be that big. I sit in this auditorium. They got cameras, they got media. And I'm sitting up there with my wife as the owner's getting ready to introduce me. And she hits me in the side. And I looked at her, I said, I know I should have wrote a speech. She starts laughing. I said, I'll be okay. And I go up there, and I can't even remember what I said, but I guess a lot of players heard it, and they were excited because they came in the office the next day. And Vinny Testaverde was one of the first guys in the door, right? And it was a great experience. There's no doubt about that. And I inherited a good football team. I had Vinny there, and Chad Pennington was the backup guy, and Curtis Martin was running back. Lavernus Coles was one of the receivers. Had really good Marvin. We had a bunch of really good players, and we made a nice run. If Chad doesn't get hurt, we got a pretty good football team. We were in the playoffs every year except when the quarterbacks went down.
Yeah,
ended up winning the division in 2002 or something like that, or won the division. So it's interesting.
You talk about your wife and maybe role reversals of support. She's always there, obviously, supporting you with your football career, et cetera. But she was diagnosed as a diabetic a few years ago. And you talk about giving back. You guys have done so much work in that world, in that realm. I just think that's so cool. Did you feel obligated to do that after you found out that she had?
She found out actually when we were in Tampa, okay. and then she got on this crusade. And obviously I've done a lot of things at home working with the Boys and Girls Clubs and a lot of the high schools here. But that was one of our deals as well. And she organized the women's organization there, and she was big on giving back. So, that's what you always try to do when you're in position to help others. It behooves you not to do that. I mean, that's just part of the deal, and you learn that from the people you're around. How can I give back? And you want nothing in return. It's just a part of, this is what you do. Can you help somebody? Can you give somebody a hand up? And that's important. And I was built that way. I've always felt that way. It's not about you so much. It's about the people you can help. I mean, it really is. Because there's a sense of, okay, I'm giving somebody an opportunity. Like the opportunities I received. I was fortunate. I received a lot of opportunities in my life. And I always I'm indebted to those people that gave me those opportunities, that I would, in turn, when I got into position to give people opportunities, I would do that as well.
Outside the Box with Herm Edwards here today. A couple more minutes, Herm. I appreciate the time. But we all know of the impact that you had on players at the field level. But my wife and I were watching some of your talks with rookie recruits the other day. We were both just so fired up. And I wanted to just touch on a couple of the things that you discussed, because a lot of people, I think, don't realize that you did this. And, football goes well beyond the field. Some of the standouts to me, which I think are just the greatest life lessons that maybe you can elaborate on a little bit. And the first one's a really uncommon trait, unfortunately, I feel like, in so many people today, but accountability. And you didn't just mean on the field.
Right. No, I think you're accountable, to yourself and to the people you serve. I've always said this, in life, you're a servant. And if you look at it that way, you're accountable to those people. You want to do the right thing. You try to do the right thing on purpose. And at times, you're going to err. And then that's part of living. I mean, you make errors. I mean, and as long as they're not intentional, they're unintentional. You do some things sometimes, you go, okay. But it's all in the sense of trying to help somebody. My errors have been in my life trusting people, right? Because that's hard to do, to trust people, because you trust them to do the right thing. And I think in coaching and in playing, that's the thing you learn when you walk in the huddle. That's the thing that's great about sports. When you walk in that huddle, there's 10 guys that you got to trust. I mean, you flat got to trust them now. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in that world, where you trust people and you don't question it. You're just like, hey, man, I ain't questioning it until they show you something different, right? And so that's how it starts, when you get married, and that's the biggest value you can have. You're married, you're going to marry somebody and you trust that person, right? There's trust. It's not even seen. There's no written document. It's just, this is what it is. And so life is about that, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
This one really hit home to me. I'm a structured planning type person, almost to a fault, and I drive my wife and kids nuts at times. But you said if you don't have a plan, you're simply wishing. And the way you worded it, I think that's so right on.
Yeah, I've always said this, and I tell this to young people, and I learned this in school, and I can remember teachers always says, well, you got to have goals. And I went, okay. And as you get older, you go, okay. And they say, remember, you used to be little, they say, write your goals on the refrigerator so you can see them every day. But they forgot this one thing when they said goals. What's the plan? A goal without a plan is a wish. What is your plan to achieve those goals? You got to have a plan first. Mm-hmm. You can put up all the goals you want. What's the plan? What's the strategy? What's the progression? There has to be a plan in place, because a goal without a plan, I always say, it's a wish. I tell kids that all the time. Everybody got goals. You can sit in your house and have all these goals. What's the plan? How do you achieve those things? And what happens when you got to make a detour? These things, that's life. That's how life works.
Couple quick hits here, Herm, if you don't mind, before we wrap it up. I think I know the answer to this already. You're a defensive guy, but what's your preference? A 33-30 game or a 3-zip ball game in football?
You know what? I've grown more tolerant to seeing the ball being scored. Mm-hmm. But I like those 17-10s. They're pretty nice. So you get enough scoring, but the defense doesn't get worn out,
Yep. Last meal choice, if you had to pick one.
Oh, last meal choice. That's a good one. I got to go with barbecue.
What was your best stress reliever as a player and a coach?
To work out. That's what I do. I get up every morning at 4 o'clock? Yeah, 4:15. I'm in the gym by 4:30.
I love it. My wife and I are big fitness and clean eating people. You a breakfast guy or no?
No, not a breakfast guy.
Not a breakfast guy.
I'm a snacker. I'm a little bit of a nibbler. I like my sweets. That's why I work out too. I like sweets. I got a sweet tooth. I got a bad sweet tooth. but I like my sweets. But you'd be surprised when you work out. What I've learned, when I work out early in the morning, you can think about your whole day, what you need to accomplish, right? No one's going to bother you. The peacefulness of no phone calls, no nothing. It's just silence. It's just you in the gym, and you can just think. I get all my thoughts. I ponder my thoughts, whatever. And when I come out of there, I'm good. I'm set for the day.
Yeah, it sets the tone. You're absolutely right. One more, Herm. What's the most difficult part about being dad?
Watching your kids grow up. Because now all of a sudden I got a 18-year-old and a 17-year-old. Gabrielle was born in New York. Vivian was born in Kansas City. Now I've got one going to be a senior. You're looking at colleges. The other one's a junior. They're both driving. And I can remember when they were really little, right? And like, you used to hug them and hold them. And now it's like they got their own agendas. They're just growing up and they're going to leave. And you're going, really? What happened to this time? I mean, it's amazing how time goes by so fast. Right?
Yeah.
It just does. And you watch them grow up and you're hopeful of this. You're hopeful that you said enough things. Now, we still have supper together. You can't have it every day anymore because they got stuff. They're athletes and they swim and they do these other things. But at least 4 nights a week, we have dinner together and we discuss what happened in school and your plans and all this. And it's just interesting. Now I'm talking to an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old. When I was talking to them before when they were 6 and 7, and now you look at them and you go, wow, right? And you're just hoping all the things they've learned at the house, when they leave your home, they remember those things. And that's all you can do. That's all you can do. And you want these guardrails on them, but eventually when they leave, you got to hope all the things they've seen around you and how the dad and the mom react, and this is why I always said to guys, I said, when you have kids, whether you have girls or boys, it's very important that the father of that household, you treat your wife with respect and you're a gentleman. My daughters have seen me open car doors. I don't use bad language. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I've never done that. And I'm not saying they got to marry a guy like that. But what I'm saying is they know what kind of guy that their father is. And I'm hoping those are some life lessons they'll remember going down the road, right? Because that's all you can do.
Well said, Herm. I'm a huge fan of yours. I could listen to you talk all day. I can't thank you enough for taking the time today. We appreciate it more than you know.
Anytime, my friend, and God bless you and your family, huh?
Likewise. Herm Edwards.